It was nearly 9 p.m. when I finally looked up from my screen and realized how quiet the office had gotten. The fluorescent lights hummed low, casting pale reflections on the glass walls around me. Outside, the city lights blinked through the tall windows, mirroring the slideshow still glowing on my laptop. Everyone else had cleared out hours ago. Everyone except him. I could hear the faint clink of glass from the executive corner office, the one with the tinted windows and too perfect view of downtown. I didn't have to look to know he was still here. He always stayed late, always silent, always watching. I tried to refocus, adjusting the formatting on the client pitch deck I'd been working on for days. Tomorrow morning's meeting was too important to risk being unprepared. Still, no matter how many slides I polished, my thoughts kept drifting back to him. Mr. Dorian Wells, regional director, mid-40s, calm, sharp, the kind of man who made people sit straighter when he walked into a room. And for reasons I never fully admitted to myself, I found it hard to breathe right whenever he was around. He wasn't loud or overbearing. He didn't need to be. His presence filled a room like gravity. "Still burning the midnight oil?" a deep voice said behind me. I flinched, just slightly, but managed to keep typing. I turned halfway in my chair. There he was, leaning on the cubicle wall with one hand tucked into his pocket, looking like he'd stepped out of a tailored noir film. "Yeah," I said, clearing my throat. "Wanted to get the Kramer pitch deck cleaned up before tomorrow." He nodded slowly, eyes scanning the stack of printed drafts on my desk. "Good initiative. I like that about you." My heart thudded once, too loud in the silence, and I hated how easily he could get under my skin with just a simple compliment. "Thanks," I mumbled, suddenly self-conscious. I figured it'd make tomorrow go smoother. He stepped closer, just enough to make the hairs on my arm stand up. "You always stay late. Don't think I haven't noticed." I glanced up, unsure if that was good or bad. "I guess I don't like leaving things half done." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "That makes two of us." There was a pause. Longer than it needed to be. Long enough for the quiet between us to say something I wasn't ready to say out loud. I looked away first. "So, you heading out soon?" I asked, trying to change the subject. "Eventually." He straightened up, rolled his shoulders like he'd been carrying the day on them. "Just needed to finish up a few reports, but I like the quiet. No distractions." "Yeah, same." He didn't move right away. He just watched me, or maybe studied me. I couldn't tell. His gaze was always a little too direct, like he saw past whatever version of myself I tried to present. "You do good work," he said finally. "Smart, precise. Not just another kid faking confidence." I swallowed hard. That means a lot. Coming from you. Another pause. He didn't smile this time. Just gave me a nod that felt oddly personal. Then he turned, walked back toward his office, but just before he disappeared behind the glass door, I saw him reach up and pull the blinds shut. One by one they clicked into place, cutting off the city lights, cutting me off from the view, from him. And yet, it felt like I'd just been pulled into something I didn't quite understand, something I wasn't sure I wanted to leave. I shut my laptop, stacked the printed pitch drafts, and slipped them into my messenger bag. The office was quieter now, eerily so. Even the city outside seemed to have taken a breath and gone still. I stood, slung the strap over my shoulder, and reached for my coat. Click. The sound echoed in the silence, sharp and deliberate. I froze. Slowly turned toward the main entrance of the office. The glass door was locked. Behind it stood Mr. Wells. His hand lingered on the lock, like he wanted me to notice it. And I had. He didn't speak right away, just held my gaze through the glass. Then, slowly, he walked back inside. Stood there, one hand still gripping my coat, unsure whether to be concerned or something else entirely. He stopped a few feet in front of me. His tie slightly loosened now, his sleeves rolled up. He looked different. Not relaxed exactly, but unguarded. His voice was quiet, but firm. "Why are you always running from conversations?" "With me?" The words caught me off guard. I blinked. I'm not." He raised an eyebrow. I sighed, adjusting my grip on my bag. I guess I just don't want to cross any lines. He didn't move. You're not crossing anything by talking to me, but you do keep your distance. I wasn't sure what to say to that, so I didn't say anything at all. Mr. Wells turned, motioning with a tilt of his head. Come on. Before I could ask, where, he was already walking toward the small conference room to the side, the one with the dim pendant lights and wood-paneled walls. Inside, he reached into a side cabinet and pulled out a short bottle of amber liquid. Whiskey, or maybe brandy. I wasn't sure. He poured 2 glasses without asking. I hesitated at the doorway. Sit, he said gently. So I did. We sat across from each other, the low light casting shadows on his face, softening the sharpness of his features. He slid 1 glass toward me. I didn't drink it, just held it between my fingers, watching the light dance through it. I know how it looks, he said after a moment. The locked door, the drink, this whole setup. It looks like you're trying to make a point, I said, only half joking. He nodded. Maybe I am. I studied his face. He wasn't toying with me. He was serious, but not threatening. More like searching for something. I've spent a lot of years pretending that being alone is some kind of strength, he said. I told myself it was a trade-off. Power, responsibility, silence. He took a sip from his glass. But lately, he continued, silence just feels like loneliness in disguise. I looked down at the drink in my hand. My throat was tight. You're not what I expected in a junior analyst, he said. You work hard. You listen. You think before you speak. That's rare. My face flushed. I tried to play it off with a shrug. I just don't want to mess anything up. His eyes softened. You haven't. I took a small sip, letting the burn ground me. I don't exactly feel like the type who stands out, I admitted quietly. Most of the time, I'm invisible, in a room, which is fine. It's safer that way. He leaned forward, voice low but steady. You're not invisible to me. My heart stalled. For a moment, the room felt impossibly still, like even the air had gone quiet to listen. I looked up. He was watching me, really watching me, and not with that distant professional gaze I was used to. This was something else, something personal. Why? Me? I whispered before I could stop myself. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, walked over to the window, and looked out into the night. I've worked with a lot of people. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Most come and go. But you stayed late. You always stay late. I felt my breath catch. He turned to face me again. You notice things. You care more than you admit. And you don't hide it well. I laughed under my breath. That's not exactly a compliment. It is to me, he said softly. A long silence stretched between us, the kind that made time feel warped. My glass was still full. I set it down. His eyes didn't leave mine, and in that silence, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to feel it settle in the space between us, just enough to know something had begun. I don't know how long we sat there. The conference room had gone quiet again. Just the low hum of the city outside, the amber liquid in our glasses catching the dim light. But the real noise was inside me. It was inside. My thoughts, my heartbeat, my own breathing, all too loud. He hadn't said anything else after, "You're not invisible to me," and I hadn't dared to ask him to repeat it. My fingers tightened slightly around the base of the glass. I looked at him again, and it hit me. This wasn't new. This feeling, this ache in my chest, the one that made it hard to speak. I'd felt it before. I just hadn't let myself name it. The memories came back faster than I could stop them. There was that time on the business trip to Chicago. 2 nights, 1 client, too many hours in shared meetings. We'd taken an elevator down after a late dinner with the clients. Just the 2 of us, standing shoulder to shoulder in that sleek chrome box. He'd made a joke, something dry but surprisingly funny, and I laughed, genuinely. It was one of the few times I saw him smile like he meant it. And as we walked out into the lobby, he'd placed his hand on my back to guide me forward, just for a second. Except, it stayed. Longer than it needed to. Just his palm, lightly resting between my shoulder blades. I remember freezing, just for a breath, wondering if I was imagining it, if maybe he did that with everyone. But no. It felt deliberate, familiar, almost, and warm. It was only when we stepped outside into the cold that he pulled his hand back, and not once did we speak about it again. Another flash, him at the team holiday party, tie loosened, leaning against the bar while I tried not to stare at the way his shirt clung to his chest. I'd had 2 drinks, maybe 3, and caught myself watching him across the room more than I watched the slideshow playing behind us. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did. I never figured it out. Now, in this dim conference room, with the door locked, and the rest of the world asleep, those memories didn't feel like accidents anymore. He shifted in his seat. I did too. Our knees brushed, not by accident. I sucked in a quiet breath. The contact was brief, but it set my skin humming. He didn't move away. If anything, he shifted closer. Not much, just a few inches, but enough that the space between us felt charged now, like a storm waiting to break. "Can I ask you something?" I said, surprised at how shaky my voice sounded. He nodded slowly, eyes locked on mine. Are you flirting with me?" The words hung in the air, thick and dangerous. A muscle in his jaw twitched. He didn't smile, didn't smirk, just met my gaze with a kind of quiet gravity. "Would it be a problem if I was?" he asked. God. I didn't know what to say. My mind scrambled for an answer, but all I could do was look away, down at the table, down at the floor, down anywhere, but into his eyes. Because if I looked, I might say something I couldn't take back. Something I'd buried too long. My pulse thudded in my ears. "I don't know," I whispered. That's fair. Another silence. But this one didn't feel empty. It felt full of all the things we weren't saying. He leaned back slightly, giving me space. Not retreating, just waiting. He was always good at that, waiting for other people to catch up. Stared at the grain of the wooden table, tracing the swirls with my eyes. "Do you—" I began, but then stopped. "Do I what?" he asked, voice calm, even. "Do you do this often?" "This?" "Flirt with employees." His expression didn't change. "No." I looked up at him then, and I believed him. "Then why me?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. His eyes softened. "Because I see you. And somehow, that scared me more than anything else." There was something terrifying about being seen, truly seen. Not as a set of numbers in a spreadsheet, not as a reliable junior analyst who turned in clean reports and stayed late without complaining, but as a man, as a person. And right now, I wasn't sure if I was ready for that, or if I even deserved it. I stood up, needing to move, needing air that wasn't heavy with implication. He stayed seated, watching me carefully. "I should go," I said. Even though my legs didn't want to carry me out of the room, he didn't stop me, didn't plead, just nodded once. "Okay," but I could feel the weight of everything we'd left unsaid pressing against my back as I walked toward the door. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, not even close. He sighed, a long, tired sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep. "I shouldn't have done that," he said quietly, standing up. "This wasn't fair to you." His footsteps echoed softly across the floor as he walked to the door. I watched him twist the lock. The click was quiet, but final. "You're free to go," he said without turning around. For a moment, I just stood there. My bag hung from my shoulder, my coat folded over one arm. I was exactly where I'd planned to be when I packed up 15 minutes ago. Ready to leave. Except I wasn't. I walked to the door slowly, almost automatically. My heart was hammering in my chest, louder than it should have been for someone just heading home. My hand hovered over the handle. This was the moment I was supposed to walk away, be smart, keep things professional. avoid regret. But all I could hear in my head was his voice, low and sincere. Because I see you. And now, with the door in front of me and him behind me, I had to ask myself something I hadn't before. What was scarier, leaving this room or staying in it? I took a slow breath and turned around. He was still standing by the window, his back to me, one hand resting on the frame like he was bracing himself. His shoulders were tense, unmoving. "Do you really want me to leave?" I asked. The words came out quieter than I expected, but they cut through the stillness like glass. He didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice was so soft I almost didn't hear it. "No." He turned then, slowly. We looked at each other across the room. I set my coat down, then my bag. I didn't move any closer just yet. I didn't need to. Everything between us was already too close. He walked back to the table, and I followed. This time, when we sat down, it wasn't across from each other. It was side by side. Not touching, but not far either. I could feel his presence like static in the air. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. I looked over, and so did he. Our eyes met. There was no challenge in his gaze now, no calculation, just something bare, something real. His knee brushed against mine again. This time I didn't pull away. My breath caught in my throat. His hand moved slightly on the table, fingers flexing like he wasn't sure what they were allowed to do. Neither of us moved any further. But the space between our shoulders felt tighter than it should have. I turned slightly toward him. He mirrored me. We leaned in, just enough for the air between our mouths to grow warm. Our foreheads nearly touched. I could see the edge of his jaw, the tiny crease above his brow, the way his eyes flicked between mine and my lips. I stopped breathing. So did he. But we didn't close the gap. We hovered there, suspended, like the moment itself was too fragile to break. And maybe that was what made it real. Not the kiss we almost shared, but the choice not to. Because it meant we both understood what it would mean if we did. I leaned back first, only a few inches. He followed, just as slowly, like we'd choreographed the whole thing in silence. I glanced down at my hands. "You know this changes everything," I murmured. "Yes," he said. "But maybe that's not such a bad thing." I looked at him again. There was something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Hesitation, yes, but also hope. And maybe a little fear. I understood that. I felt it too. The moment was still hanging between us. But now it didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a question. One neither of us had answered yet. Not with words, not with action. But it was there, waiting. And neither of us had left the room. Not yet. After that night, everything changed. But not in the ways I expected. Not with declarations or fireworks or even that kiss we didn't allow ourselves to finish. No, the change was quieter than that. Like something shifting beneath the surface, invisible to the eye but impossible to ignore. The next morning at the office, he didn't say a word to me. We passed each other in the hallway. He looked right, through me. Or maybe not through me, maybe past me. Like if he met my gaze, everything would collapse. Maybe he was right. The silence continued through the week. He didn't join our team's daily stand-up meetings. He started emailing instructions through his assistant instead of dropping by my desk. There were no more comments on my work, no long glances across the open floor plan, just cold, clean distance. I told myself that was for the best, but it didn't feel like it. I couldn't focus. My attention slipped during meetings. I stayed at my desk long after everyone else had left, not because I had to, but because I was hoping, stupidly, desperately, that he might step out of his office and say something, anything, but he never did. Then came the email. Subject: new project assignment. Hi, you'll be moving to the Vanguard account for the next 6 weeks. Work directly with Chloe. I'll be off the day-to-day. D. No explanation, no reasoning, just a new direction, a new distance. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes without moving. It wasn't even the project that hurt. It was what it implied. I was being moved, shifted, pushed out, neatly, professionally, without a trace of scandal. I considered quitting, more than once. Late at night, sitting on the edge of my bed with my head in my hands, I thought about walking away, about finding something new, something that didn't make my chest ache every time I opened my inbox. But I didn't. Because as much as I tried to convince myself that he didn't feel anything, that maybe it had all been one-sided, I knew better. You don't look at someone the way he looked at me that night if it means nothing. You don't stop yourself from kissing someone unless it means everything. Still, the silence dragged on. Days blurred together. The air at the office felt thin and sharp. I started avoiding the conference room entirely. Then, one night, maybe a week after the reassignment, I heard a knock at my apartment door. It was late. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, he was standing there. Mr. Wells, Dorian. No tie, no blazer, just a slate gray sweater and jeans. He looked different, softer, tired, and terrified. I wasn't sure you'd answer, he said. I didn't speak, just stepped aside to let him in. He hesitated before crossing the threshold, like he needed permission to enter this version of my world. He walked slowly into the living room, standing awkwardly by the bookshelf. I don't know how to do this, he said after a moment. Do what? I asked. He turned to me. His voice was quiet, careful. Be this version of myself. I stayed still. Let him speak. For a long time, I've separated everything, he continued. Work, emotions, needs. Like if I kept them all in different boxes, none of it could touch the other. Nothing would get messy. And now it's messy, I said softly. He nodded once. With you, it is. But I don't want to pretend it's not. The room was quiet again. I could hear the radiator ticking softly in the background, the faint buzz of a street lamp outside. He looked down, then back at me. I want you in it, he said. This life, whatever version it becomes. I took a slow step forward. My chest was tight, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was something else. Something that felt like hope. You don't have to know how yet, I said. We can figure it out. His eyes locked on mine, and for once, there was no hesitation. I reached for his hand. He didn't flinch. His fingers slid into mine, tentative at first, then steady. We stood there, hand in hand, for a moment that felt outside of time. The apartment around us faded. The street sounds vanished. All I could feel was the warmth of his skin, the weight of everything unsaid finally finding shape between our palms. He stepped closer. This time, no words, no questions. He leaned in, and I met him halfway. The kiss was soft at first, careful, like we were both still afraid to break the spell. But then his hand moved to the side of my face, and mine curled around his waist, and suddenly we weren't thinking anymore. We were just there, in it, fully, finally. His mouth tasted faintly of coffee and something unnameable, something like honesty. When we pulled back, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. We just stood there, foreheads touching, breathing in sync. Because this time it had happened, and neither of us had run. It's funny how routines change. For the longest time, staying late at the office had meant exhaustion, deadlines, isolation under fluorescent lights, a sense that no one even knew I was there. Not really. Now it means something else. It's been 4 months since that night in my apartment. Since he knocked on my door not as my boss, but as a man. Uncertain, honest, and ready. Since we finally kissed without flinching from what it meant. A lot has changed since then. Not in dramatic, sweeping ways. We didn't make some grand announcement. There were no memos or secret meetings. Just a series of quiet adjustments. He moved to a different department, overseeing long-term strategy, removed from direct reports. I got promoted to a new team under a different supervisor. It was smart, clean, HR approved. We still work in the same building, same floor. But now, there's space where there needs to be, and connection where it matters most. Boundaries, yes. But not distance. We're not hiding anymore. We have lunch together sometimes. Not always, but enough. Sometimes we walk to the train station together in the evenings, talking about work, or books, or things that have nothing to do with either. He's funny in a dry, unexpected way. I still catch myself watching him when he's not looking. But what's different now is, I don't have to look away. There's a steadiness to it now. A rhythm. Something real. Tonight, we both stayed late. Not because we had to. Not because something was due in the morning. Just because we wanted to. I was going over a quarterly report. He was reviewing a proposal for a board presentation. The floor was mostly empty, the sky outside painted in soft indigo, with the city lights flickering to life. At some point, he stood and walked to the front entrance. I heard it again, the sound I'll never forget. Click. He locked the door, but this time, it didn't make my chest tighten. It made me smile. He walked back toward me, rolling up his sleeves the way he always did when he wanted to get comfortable. Hungry? He asked. Starving. He pulled a takeout bag from behind his desk. Thai food, my favorite. I don't know how long he'd had it hidden, or if he was waiting to surprise me. Probably both. We sat at the conference table, unwrapped the containers, passed chopsticks back and forth like old habits. He told me about a call with a client in London. I told him about a new intern who thought I was 35. We laughed. It felt easy. At some point, he reached over casually and rested his hand on mine. His thumb brushed across my knuckles. Just once. I didn't flinch. Neither did he. Later, when the food was gone and the lights dimmed, I stood by the window and looked out over the city. He came up behind me, placed a hand on my shoulder, then leaned in, his chin resting near the crook of my neck. We stayed like that for a long time, breathing, quiet, together. No pretending, no performance. Eventually, I turned to face him. His hand found my waist. I still remember the first time you locked that door, I whispered. He smiled, something soft and knowing in his eyes. So do I. I reached up, brushing my fingers against the collar of his shirt. Back then, it scared me. I know, he said. But now? I leaned in, resting my forehead against his. It's the first time I didn't feel trapped. He looked into my eyes, fingers tightening gently around mine. I felt chosen,